I'm Emily Actor-Zandi, Managing Director of Atlantic Live, the events division of The Atlantic, and welcome on this beautiful afternoon. We have a gorgeous view. It's a sunny day. I would like to welcome you to another installment of our Women of Washington series, which is now in its 6th consecutive year. The Women of Washington series has showcased eminent female leaders in Washington. We've heard from cabinet secretaries, key administration officials, and leaders in Congress. And today, we add to our roster of the top women of Washington. I would like to take a moment to thank our underwriter for this program, ExxonMobil, and in particular, Terry Ferriello, Vice President of ExxonMobil's Washington office, for making this ongoing series possible. So thank you so much, Terry. As always, we encourage those of you online and here in person to join the conversation by following us on Twitter at Atlantic_Live and tweeting your thoughts on today's conversation using the hashtag AtlanticWow. Our Women of Washington series continues today with Senators Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota and Deb Fischer of Nebraska, 2 of only 20 female members of the Senate. They are here to talk with us about the impact women are having on the world's greatest deliberative body and the way they see women changing the Senate in the years to come. Senator Klobuchar is the senior Democratic senator from Minnesota. She was the first woman elected to the Senate from her state. And Senator Fischer is the senior Republican senator from Nebraska and the second female senator elected from the Cornhusker state. Molly Ball is a staff writer with The Atlantic where she covers U.S. politics, and we think there is no one better to lead this afternoon's conversation. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. If everyone could silence your cell phones, we'd appreciate that. And we will have time for your questions towards the end of our program and want you all to be a part of this conversation. So please wait for a member of our team to come to you with a microphone and simply identify yourself by sharing your name and affiliation before asking your question. And now, let's get this program started. Please welcome Senators Klobuchar, Fischer, and Molly Ball to the stage. And Molly, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Senators, for being here. Let's jump right in. I want to start with the big question that Emily raised and just get your thoughts from sort of 30,000 feet. What impact are women having on Washington, Senator Fischer?
Well, obviously, it's a positive impact, isn't it? As women have everywhere. I think we bring, obviously, different views. We have different life experiences. We have a lot to offer, but it really means establishing relationships and being able to work across the aisle, to work with both women and men who are colleagues. And I think women are better at doing that. I think we reach out more, and maybe because of sometimes people in my generation, women were sandwiched between children, grandchildren, and parents. We have to learn a lot of patience. It doesn't always come easy, but that patience helps us in our relationships.
Senator Klobuchar.
Well, I was just thinking, as Deb was saying, women do this better. I was thinking I probably didn't say that 10 years ago, and she probably may not have either, just because things have changed. And we not only know that anecdotally in the United States Senate, there actually is a study from Harvard to prove it. And they showed that the women in the Senate sponsor each other's bills more, that we pass more bills, and that we're able to work across the aisle better. And maybe that's just because there's 20 of us. They can't call us Sweet 16 anymore, so we like that. And we've gone out of our way to build trust. And I think that's the defining difference, because as Deb says, it's not like we agree on everything. And when Deb actually came to the Senate, she asked me to be her Democratic mentor. Yes. And you can see she's done quite well. She's now the senior Republican.
And Amy's going to take all the credit for it.
Yeah, of course. But, you know, we both are from agriculture states, and we both are really focused on some of the business issues, so that was good. But I just think you don't see that happening all the time with our male colleagues. We get together, the group of us, about every other month for dinner, and of course what's said in that room never gets out of that room, and of course we never talk about the male senators. And it's just forged something where when we do, first of all, we know each other better, and we trust each other more. So that means you have common ground. So that means that you can, like we might be both interested in broadband. So we reach out to each other on that issue. And you figure out where you can have some consensus and then build from there. And that just isn't always the truth with some of our other colleagues.
Well, you raise a fascinating point, because you said, I don't know if I would have felt okay saying 10 years ago women do it better. Do you feel like you can, to coin a phrase, lean in a little bit more to being proud of being a woman these days, that voters in particular are more accepting of the idea that it's a good thing to have more women in politics?
Yeah, I do. When I first started running, when I was running for the Senate, just picture this, it's 2006, so you wouldn't think this was happening, but I literally would go to my newspaper editorial boards in some of our more rural areas, and the reporters would say, well, can a woman win? Do you think a woman can really win? This is in 2006, because 2 women had lost running for major office, and I would always point for some reason to Kay Bailey Hutchinson. I go, well, a woman won in Texas. So, and I would have people say things at huge public meetings. Like this one woman stood up, I still remember, my name is Rose Bradovich, and I'm a wife of a steelworker. I've never voted for a woman before, but in your case, I'm going to make an exception. And I finally started saying things. I had this thing I would say when it would come up, which made no sense at all, but it seemed to work with the men who had some resistance to it, because they would say, well, I don't know if you can win, these kind of, which were code for the woman thing. And I would say, well, you know what? I'm running as my record as a prosecutor and the fact that I got things done. I'm proud of being a woman. I'm glad to have a lot of women's support, but I'm not running as a woman senator. And they said, I'm running because I want to get things done for the state. And then I would say, because the last time I checked, half the voters were men. And if I was just running as a woman, I wouldn't win. And our staff would go, why are you saying? But I would see all the men that go, yeah. And so it didn't really quite make sense, but I think that the message I was sending was that I'm running more for something besides just changing the gender numbers in the U.S. Senate, which is a worthy cause, as we know, but it just can't be the only reason.
How about you, Senator Fischer? How do you balance that slight tension between being proud to increase women's representation, but on the other hand, convincing people that you're not just there as by virtue of sort of identity politics?
I'm a little older than Amy, and I've never had any problem in saying women can do it better or women can do it just as good. I started out being involved in local issues. I was on a school board for 20 years. I was involved in ag issues. I'm a cattle rancher from Nebraska. And I would be the only woman at many of the meetings that I attended. First off, I refused to serve coffee. That's a statement back in those days, right, ladies? That was a statement back then. And I think I never have played the gender card. I have never run as just a woman. I ran as a former school board member. I ran as a state senator who had a very successful record in getting big policy issues passed in the state of Nebraska, being a leader within our unicameral. I knew that I needed to appeal to all Nebraskans, as we all do. No matter if you're from Minnesota, Nebraska, if you're in business, if you're in politics, if you're in education, no matter what you do, we represent everybody. We represent everybody. And I have felt from the very beginning that's who I am. That's the message that I have always had, and I encourage women to embrace that. You know, we don't just have women's issues. You tell me what a woman's issue is. When I was first elected to the legislature, a reporter came up to me. There were 3 women out of 8 of us who were elected that year. And she asked me if I was going to focus on women's issues. And I said, well, what would that be? And she said, well, your involvement in education, you know, you've really been involved in that, and school finance. And I said, you know what I hear from my constituents? Yes, they're concerned about education, but they're really worried about property taxes. And they're really worried about public safety. And they want to see some roads built. They want to see, you know, infrastructure taken care of here in the state of Nebraska. I said, those issues are everybody's issues. And I've carried that to the Senate. You know, I believe that all issues are everyone's issues. You know, we're concerned about national security as women. I serve on the Armed Services Committee. I chair the subcommittee on emerging threats and capabilities. So I have jurisdiction over cybersecurity and special ops and counterterrorism and intelligence. That's a woman's issue, isn't it? You know, that's an issue for everybody. Amy and I are on the Commerce Committee. We deal with so many issues, such a broad spectrum. Do we have our telecom people in here? Broad spectrum of issues that we deal with. And those are everybody's issues, whether it's technology or infrastructure, the FAA, the FCC, technology, telecom. I mean, those are issues that touch each and every one of us. So when I think of women's issues, I think of national security, I think of economic security, I think of jobs, I think of families, and that's what every American is concerned about.
Well, I think that's certainly true, but at the same time, there are going to be issues that concern women more than men, right? I mean, I hear from women voters and women candidates alike this frustration in particular about the abortion issue, that they hate the idea that this is all that women care about, whether it's the ads run by the Obama campaign or Mark Udall's campaign in 2014, where he got nicknamed Mark Uterus because it was basically all he was running on in a sort of a wedge. But you also have done work on some issues in the Senate that are considered women's issues, on the issues of pay equity and family leave. And those might be considered non-traditional issues for a Republican to be interested in. Can you talk about your work on those issues?
Well, I think they're everybody's issues. As I said, why wouldn't they be Republican issues? You know, everybody believes in equal pay for equal work. You know, come on, that's what we all believe in. That's the law of this country. And so I was really excited to be able to embrace that issue, to come forward with a good bill. Hopefully we can come together and put politics aside and pass something that can be passed. You know, this is a bill that reinforces the laws that we currently have, and it puts in place a non-retaliation clause. President Obama did an executive order on non-retaliation, so the people can ask, what are you making? You know, you can compare what your salary is, what your wage is. You know, that, and Democrats support that. President Obama did it. This is something that can pass. It's something Republicans support. It's something Democrats support. And to me, it's a step that we need to take instead of poking each other all the time on issues and not getting anything done. The paid family leave's another great issue. Angus King is my co-sponsor on that bill. You know, that's another one where it's not the stick, but it's a carrot to see some changes out there. So I think there's proposals if we can, again, develop relationships, develop trust, be able to get something done instead of putting it in politics all the time.
And I think the point is that women, too, have gained economic power, but still aren't equal. And you have 40% now of the households have women breadwinner, women making more money than the man. You have 2/3 of households relying on women's income in some way. And so these aren't really women's issues, as Deb was saying. They're economic issues for everyone. And once you start talking about them in that way, I think you get more support. And in fact, when President Obama brought up the equal pay issue at the State of the Union, if any of you remember that was one of the moments where, surprisingly, everyone stood, men and women, Democrats and Republicans, and that was when he said, well, we don't want to be living in a Mad Men episode at this time in our lives. Although I did have my moment where I ended up standing, but I thought to myself, well, if John Hamm was in the episode, I don't know. But no, I did. I did stand in. cheered like everyone else. But I think that's what it is. It's changing, and then when you change the discussion about how you think about these things, then you get more support and you get them through. And I'm hoping that this will be going into this next year will be the time that we can pass some of these. Of course, it depends on who wins the White House.
We won't talk about that.
We are going to get to that, but I promised I wouldn't turn this whole thing into a 2016 discussion because I know everybody is a little bit sick of the presidential race, even though it's June. But I wanted to go back to the study that you were referencing that said that women legislators are more bipartisan and more productive, they introduce more bills, they get more bills passed, they have more co-sponsors from the other party. There was also this idea going around a few years ago that it was women senators who banded together to end the shutdown.
Well, it was true. That was led by Susan Collins. And I was the first Democrat to call her, and there were 14 people, and they were half women, which is more overrepresented of our numbers. We did let John McCain in and a few guys, but it was 14 of us that basically went to leadership with a plan and said, we have the press gallery reserved in 3 hours, and we're going to go there unless you do something like this. And that's what happened. So it was that's how we started the Common Sense Caucus. So.
And did that come out of the bipartisan bond that you forged over the dinners that you talked about?
Yeah, it was. I would say so. Yes, and it was not just the dinners. It's just more. It can be a little more informal than that, but it's just the relationships that you form. So,
I guess my concern is that when you get this idea that women are more compromising or work together better or are, it seems to me a very slippery slope from there to the stereotype that we're all sort of nurturing mommy types, right? Yeah. And that we can't be tough or aggressive because we're more interested in holding hands and having everybody agree on things. That's not me, right? I'm a mom, but I'm like the world's least nurturing person. And and so I wonder if you see any danger in this positive stereotyping of women.
I'm just thinking about the negative environment of Washington. We don't see much danger of positive stereotyping of anyone. So I think it's overall a good thing.
As a reporter, I worry about that too.
I have worried about that too, and sometimes the discussions about that goes into this. Well, aren't you guys nicer? And don't you? Right. Okay, let's talk about what we're really talking about here. Deb did this when she talked about the work on the Intelligence Committee, right? Dianne Feinstein heads up, or is now the ranking member on the Intelligence Committee, dealing with the biggest terrorism tax in the world. Right? That's her job. And and just because she happens to be able to work with someone better, well, that's good for our country. Or Patty Murray is the one that negotiated after we got the initial compromise done. Patty Murray negotiated with Ryan before he was Speaker to get that deal that we were able to then bring out and get through the Congress so we didn't have another shutdown. These are like man-sized jobs, to use a stereotype, right? And what I have found about the women is there's this funny saying I heard once that women leaders, I don't agree with all of it, women leaders speak softly and carry a big statistic. And I don't agree with the speak softly part, but I do think the women leaders tend to run on and win on accountability. They take the accountability route, and that's what they aren't able to just be all macho about something and say, hey, I'll get it done. They actually are able to win and govern based on accountability, and I do think that's a bit of a difference.
Well, the question, I guess, Senator Fischer, is however it happens in practice, does it create obstacles if people have this view of women as being nicer?
Well, I think we're nice, but I also think the women senators are the toughest in there. You know, we're relentless, I would say. We work really hard. I don't know a woman senator who doesn't work really, really hard. I personally cannot have enough information when I'm trying to gain knowledge on an issue. When I'm working on bills, I like to have a lot of information. I think it's a compliment to be called tenacious. Sometimes I'm called a bulldog. I'll take that too. But I think we're very tough. I think we're very tough. And people who underestimate us find out pretty quickly that we will mean what we say and we will follow through.
Is that even an advantage sometimes, being underestimated?
Yes.
Can you get one over on people that way?
Yes.
stories you want to share about that?
Oh, lots.
Yeah.
You know, when I was campaigning for Senate, one of my first meetings I had with a big businessman in the city of Omaha, and he said, "Do you think you're tough enough to be a United States Senator?" And I said, "You've never watched me in the legislature, have you? No, you've never watched a debate." People sometimes take good manners and a nice smile for being weakness, and I consider it a strength.
Very good. I feel like our current political climate has a lot to say on that question of manners. But no, I do want to talk a little bit about the presidential race. You know, 2 days ago, obviously, a woman became the presumptive nominee of a major political party for the first time in American history. So, putting partisanship aside, Senator Fischer, were you in any way moved by that moment?
I have to compliment Secretary Clinton. That is a big step. It's a big step for women. That being said, again, I don't look at a candidate based on gender. I look at candidates based on their position on issues, based on how it aligns with my principles, my values, and I don't believe gender should play into it, but I certainly congratulate her and recognize the achievement that she's made.
How about you, Senator?
Well, for me, it was the end of a long road. It was very good, and I was really excited about it. My mom actually always wanted Hillary Clinton to be the president, and she had this picture up of her and my mom that was taken when Hillary had come to Minnesota for an event for me. And Hillary's looking kind of angelic, and my mom is like this. And she had that picture on her refrigerator until the day she died. Oh, and so I took it and I framed it and I put it in my office. I think this really was about, as she said in her speech, going back to the suffragettes in Seneca Falls, that this was this major passing of a torch through time and after generations of work. And while not everyone may agree with her views or even support her, I just think this is quite a big deal for our country. I have to go back to when I was in college, and Walter Mondale, my mentor from Minnesota, picked Geraldine Ferraro to be his running mate. And it was, I still remember what she wore. She was wearing this red dress with these white pearls. And it just was this moment where I thought anything and everything was possible. And that's what this said to the country when Hillary got picked, because it means that these, while we have come up and been role models, I hope, in our states, there are still only 20 of us. In the history of America, there are over 1,900 men that have been senators and only 46 women that we're dealing with. You think of how few women are governors, and that gets to a little bit about what we're talking about is the women having to or wanting to do different things to get to that point of leadership. Prosecutors, CEOs, business, so you can break that mold a bit and get into voters' heads that you can in fact lead. Hillary was Secretary of State, right? Those are jobs that weren't always expected to be held by women. And I hope we reach the point where that won't be the case, but I think a lot of what's been going on is it's still been hard for people to visualize women in that role of not even just being an advocate, but being a leader and being in charge of things. And that's why that Tuesday night was so important for our future.
And do you think you'll be on that ticket in November?
Ask Deb, you know. I love my job right now, and I have coming from the state where we've produced not one but two vice presidents, are Hubert Humphrey and Walter Mondale, and the joke always is in our state that the moms bounce the babies on their knee and say, one day you can grow up to be vice president. I'm a little bit of an expert on watching this, and so when I think of the criteria that she should use, I think of the two great vice presidents that we've had. Oh no, not Minnesota. No, it's this idea that you have someone that you can trust, and that the president, in the two cases of our vice presidents, the president picks someone they trust. In this case, given the negativity that you're hearing in our politics, I think it's really important to pick someone who's optimistic about the country, that can bring people together. And I think it is entirely her choice. She has to have someone that she's comfortable with, and someone that she thinks can govern this country.
So now I have to ask you, are you going to be on the Republican ticket?
I love my job. I do.
Everybody here loves their job.
Yeah, so do I. We have really good jobs.
I love my job. I am so very, very fortunate and very honored to be in the United States Senate. I am a legislator. I love introducing bills. I love working on amendments. I like to try and pull people together to get something done. I hate to compromise, but as I mentioned earlier, patience, compromise, that's what it takes in the United States Senate. It does take 60 votes. So life would be easier if Amy just did it my way. You know, let's be honest here. Let's be honest. But that's not reality. That's not reality. So I love my job.
Well, there are other women senators who have been talked about as potential running mates for Secretary Clinton. Do you think that Americans would be willing to vote for a two-woman presidential ticket?
It's the way I look at it. If you look at history here, there's a really actually quite a track record of single-gender tickets that have won. In fact, it is the only track record, is the only thing that has won. So that would lead you to believe that if you want to win, you have to have a single-gender ticket. No, I don't know. I think the public would be more than ready to accept a single-gender ticket. Yes.
Well, I think one thing that's not in question is that the gender dynamic of this election is going to be fascinating. Not only do you have the first woman nominee, but she is up against a candidate who seems to embody, shall we say, a rather old school notion of masculinity. Senator Fischer, do you think Donald Trump is a misogynist?
No, no. I've met Donald Trump recently. I like him. He listens. Who would have guessed? But no, not at all.
Do you have any advice for him? We've heard a lot of Republican office holders lately saying he needs to tone it down. Do you agree with that?
I think Donald Trump has touched a chord with the American people and all across this country. And I know, I feel it when I travel this country, when I'm in my state, that there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration, that things are not happening, that nothing's getting done, and you see it on both sides. I mean, we see it with Senator Sanders and his supporters as well. So there is this wide swath of Americans who feel that way. I think obviously he's been able to touch people with that and with his message. So I wouldn't give him advice except to say that when I travel my state and when I travel this country, my message is always to talk about what we're doing in the United States Senate, what we're accomplishing in the United States Senate. You know, my first couple years were a little frustrating, but we have really, really worked together, and we have passed major legislation. You know, we passed a long-term highway bill, and I was really, really lucky to work on that through two of my committees, Commerce and EPW. You know, I got to be on the conference committee for it. That tied into what I did in my previous life in the Nebraska unicameral, where I chaired the Transportation Telecommunications Committee. So that was a huge bill. We passed an education bill, big bill. Passed it overwhelmingly. You know, we passed a doc fix. We've passed legislation to address human trafficking and suicide prevention for our vets. We've passed an FAA bill. We're working on the FCC bill. We're doing good work. We're doing big work. And like I said earlier, it only happens if you work together. So the message out there that the Senate isn't doing anything, that Congress isn't doing anything, is not the message that I like to hear at all, because I don't think it's true. And I think it's part of my mission to be able to tell Americans that we're working, the system is working the way it's supposed to. It may be frustrating at times, it may be slow at times, it's not going as fast as you want, but this is the best government there is. We should be proud of it. We should recognize the good things that are happening.
Well, as you mentioned, people are very angry on both sides, and they do feel that government isn't doing its job. Are they wrong? Are they misinformed? Why aren't they getting that message that the government is working?
I think they hear it a lot, not necessarily from you, but maybe from others, you know, in the media. When you have blogs going all the time, when you've got 24/7 news going all the time, when you have everybody's an expert, you can look up anything and get bombarded on the internet. It's not facts, folks. Please, it's not facts. But you just get bombarded with all this stuff that those of us, I think, who are in positions of responsibility need to be responsible and get out the truth, get out the message that we are working together, we're getting things done, and we will continue to do so.
Senator Klobuchar, do you think the government is working?
I think there is a sense of anger around this issue that people are finding it harder and harder to get by, and I think there's truth to that when you look at the numbers. They are having a harder time being able to work and have their family because they're working more hours, or they're having a harder time affording their things as simple as their telephone service, cell phones, or they can't afford a house, or they can't afford to send their kid to college, big ticket item. And you see those escalating costs. So it has become harder and harder for middle income, lower income people to get by. And those are real things. And I think that's going to be a major discussion in the presidential campaign. Now you see everything from Hillary's proposals to Bernie making this a burning issue in his, I didn't even mean that as a, in his campaign, to some of Trump's proposals on taxes, to Ryan coming out with the low-income proposal just last week. So I think that is a lot of what's going on, and I'm very hopeful that we need to move on this. And so a little disagreement on that point, but what I do agree with Deb on is that we have been getting some bills done. And I'm one that will, I go back, my lowest point in Congress was actually the fiscal cliff night when we were voting until 3 in the morning on New Year's Eve, you know, that magical moment. And I literally was out on the Senate floor at midnight. I looked to my left, I saw Harry Reid. I look to my right, I see Mitch McConnell, every girl's dream on New Year's Eve. And so anyway, but that was actually the low point. And then we got to the shutdown, which was even worse. And that was a thing that cost our economy billions of dollars. And then something did switch. People got really pissed off, and the public did, and people started working together. I don't think that you could say that Democrats have been obstructionists. I think that there's been work on both sides in getting the bills passed that Deb mentioned. That being said, 3 bit of caution on that. I'd say 2 things of caution on that. Number one, we have several big ticket items that we have to get done next year that have been stopped by gridlock. 1, immigration reform. I would say huge. 2, tax reform, including the fact that we've got trillions of dollars overseas, that we'd like to make some changes to bring that money back, including some of these income inequality issues I talked about and some of these other things. So I think doing some of those big things is going to take a lot of work, and I get concerned about the outside money really on both sides that pull people apart and that make it harder to get a compromise. And so that's a piece of it. And then I'd say the other thing that kind of goes against the theory, which I believe that people of good faith have gotten bills passed, but the other thing is the confirmation of Judge Garland, or at least getting his hearing done, and that was something that goes against the history. And I think that was kind of a shock to the system for people that thought, well, when you have an opening on a Supreme Court, you have a hearing. And so those are 2 things that go against, but probably about a year ago, I was saying the exact same things Deb says, and I still believe them that we've been moving on these bills. But I think we have some huge challenges ahead, and 2 of them I understand why they'll be going into next year. I really do. The tax reform and the immigration reform at this point, because I've given up that we can get it done this year. But the Judge Garland thing, I just think we need to move as quickly as possible.
No, when I was first elected, I thought, this is, what an honor. This is so great. I'm gonna go to Washington. We're gonna take up tax reform. We're gonna look at regulations. And I mean, those were two of the big platforms I had in my campaign when I ran for the United States Senate. Because I thought, if you want to turn the economy around, if you want to see growth, if you want to close this income gap that continues to grow, the way to close it is to look at tax reform, to take that up, to look at the regulations that really burden families. 25% of the cost of a new home right now is due to regulations. I mean, that's just crazy. That puts an American dream out of reach for many, many Americans, and that's not right. So I rather naively thought, gee, I'm gonna go, this is gonna be the first thing we're gonna take up, and we haven't done it yet. So I hope that we can work together on this and be able to address these big issues. And sometimes you do it step by step by step. And if that's what it takes, that's what we need to do.
I'm going to take your questions in just a minute, so start thinking about what it is you want to ask these two brilliant senators. But first, I want to ask you one more election-related question, Senator Klobuchar. We saw Hillary Clinton, I think, talk a lot about her potential historic breakthrough in this campaign, and certainly on Tuesday night. And in the primaries, it didn't seem to resonate. There were a lot of, especially younger women, who really gave a cold shoulder to that appeal and were much more interested. I spoke to a lot of particularly college students, young women, who said they thought Bernie Sanders was better on women's issues than Hillary Clinton. Do you find that at all, as a Hillary supporter, exasperating, or do you think there is a younger generation of women who don't appreciate some of the strides that women have made?
Well, I think that Senator Sanders clearly tapped a nerve. He has a huge amount of young people that are supporting him. And I believe those young people, because of what we're facing here with the opposition and the positions of Donald Trump on a lot of the issues that those women care about, whether it is climate change, whether it is reproductive rights, whether it is the issue of economic opportunity and not adding $30 trillion to the debt, which is Trump's proposal would do. I think that Hillary Clinton is going to be able to tap into that. And the reason, when you look back and say, oh, what went wrong here, what happened? I believe that when you get out of a primary, and she's going to be able to put these things as a contrast with Donald Trump, and she's going to be able to put out her economic plans more clearly and succinctly, you're going to see a vast support from millennials for her positions, whether it's gay marriage, whether it is all these things that I've seen. They're very cause-oriented. I have a millennial, so I have some experience. She actually does return my texts like once a month. And by the way, my trick is, I go, I'm on the airplane and the gates are, the door is closing soon. I only have 5 minutes left. Call me. And she'll call because then she knows it'll be done in 4 minutes. I one time did it when I wasn't even on the plane. All right, okay, all right. So anyway, so I have some experience with this, and what I have found is that because a lot of them came of age during the downturn, right, when things were tough, and they felt pretty screwed by what happened to them. And there's a lot of anger about what happened, and they don't feel they have the same opportunities, and in many cases they're right. And so I think because of that, they are very focused on causes and things, and Bernie has tapped into that. And I think a lot of the changeover of their support to Hillary Clinton will be based on, one, what he says, not exactly what time or day he says it. I'm a little more focused on what he says and what he does, and I have a lot of faith in him, having come into the Senate, and when he says he's going to support our nominee, that he means it. And then the second piece of this will be tapping into it by showing the contrast between her policies and Trump's, and getting that out there in a passionate way, which she can do. Women's rights are human rights. People remember that speech. They remember her after 9/11. She has that capacity.
Great. Do we have questions? There's a microphone coming for you. If you do, let's go right here in the third row in the striped jacket.
You'll stand and introduce yourself. I'll hold the microphone.
I'm Nicole Bivens Collinson. I'm with Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg, and we do international trade issues, but I don't have a trade question. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how you think we've gotten to this place where the community, the people, the public, their interactions have become more, I would say, more aggressive with each other. And if you think some of that as well has reflected into the halls of Congress, where members come in on Tuesday just before a vote, and as soon as the last vote is done, they're out the door. There's not socializing. They're not spending time together. Everyone's using emails, Twitters. When you look at some of the comments on articles, the language that is used today, that people now, I feel there's a generation, and I'm interested on your opinion, in people who think that that's how you communicate, as opposed to, I see it as information sharing on the internet, and they're trying to communicate, and so it's bled over into our language. And I just wonder how you feel that's impacted and how we can address that going forward to restore what I call civility.
Interesting question. You seem to be asking, on the one hand, about the sort of degradation of discourse and also about polarization and those types of issues. Senator Fischer, what do you think about that?
I agree with you. I'm very concerned to see protesters turn violent in this country. I remember the '68 election. I remember Miami and the siege of Chicago. I don't want to see that again. You know, everyone has the right to protest. Everyone has the right to express their ideas. Everyone has the right to express their views. But you don't have the right to do it in a violent way. I'm concerned when I see comments on the internet or on Facebook. I don't read comments on Facebook. I think people feel they're anonymous, and that there's really no accountability for them, and they can be anonymous even though their name's there. They can be anonymous and say whatever. I'm very fortunate to be in a state, and during my time in elected office, I have had good conversations with people. I just had 5 town halls this last week when I was back in the state. I travel the state all the time. I'm there about every weekend. I was in 8 cities, 5 town halls. And people can disagree, but in Nebraska, no one's ever gotten in my face. No one's yelled. I see news reports of some of our colleagues on the town halls that they've had, and I'm just appalled by it. I can't imagine that happening. But I think part of my duty is to treat everyone with respect. And at town halls, I'm not up on a stage. I walk up to people when they ask me questions and try to have a conversation with them. And I think that's important. You probably can't tell, but I'm not a podium pounder. I tend to be more quiet, calmer, and that's work on my part in many cases. But it goes back to that whole patience thing. God. But I think we have to continue to do our duty in having a civil discourse with constituents, to be out and available to constituents, to address their concerns, to justify our votes, and to encourage them to have conversations with us as well. I was very pleased that the president and the candidates have all condemned the violence that is taking place, and I hope all of us will continue to condemn it.
Senator Klobuchar, Minnesotans have a reputation for being very polite.
Yeah.
Do people ever get in your face, or is that something people only do behind the anonymity of the internet?
Yeah, no, Minnesota, they're polite, but the area of the state where my dad grew up, the Iron Range of Minnesota, they kind of, they say what's on their mind. And so we have a combination of things, but like Deb, we have a state that I think people or want to get involved. They show up at things, even if they don't agree with you. I have found them to be fairly civil. Now, the internet is some of an exception. I was sitting here thinking, I do read, not by far every one of these tweets and Facebook posts, because it gives me some sense. I found it to be incredibly helpful for getting information out and be able to talk about what you're doing. And there's been, I've sort of enjoyed some of the things that come back. And I have one guy on Facebook that's always kind of mean, named Ed. And it is hilarious because these people respond to him. They wait. They're not political themselves. These are not. And they write and they like, Ed, hey, get up on the wrong side of the bed today. You haven't written in yet. They're like taunting him. Ed,
and they
the last
defend us.
time I
and
checked,
they defend us,
right?
too.
They defend
I love
us.
that.
They're like, Ed, last time I checked, Facebook wasn't a back alley for thugs. They like it, so they kind of like police him. He doesn't care. He keeps writing, and as long as he doesn't swear, I don't care. So, and then I started to collect these not so mean tweets, the Minnesota mean tweets that are kind of not quite exactly mean, and they are. I really did collect them and read them at a roast that Franken and I did. Imagine having to do a comedy roast without Franken. You really have to kind of think ahead. And so there were things like add Amy Klobuchar. I see you wrote a book. This will be perfect to buy it and use it as the covering for my pigeon cage. And I'm like, okay, that is really pathetic. It's a mean tweet. Or at Amy Klobuchar, I saw that you wanted to bring more Syrian refugees back to America. That's because you want to shack up with all of them. I'm like, there's 11 million. Or the one that says, at my favorite one of all time, at Amy Klobuchar, the only thing that's anything good about you is your legs. So I try to actually kind of mock some of it, as you can see, and use humor when it happens. So what I just did was kind of funny, but that's what I tended to do. And then to just not take all of it completely seriously, because a lot of times it's organizations. Now those are very unique ones that people did, but sometimes they're just like flooded and they put all these things out there, and if you start getting hyper about it, you never get anything done. We're supposed to be courageous, and you become meek because you're afraid of getting beaten down by this, which, believe me, happens on both sides, and happens to you on your own side as much, which can be the hardest thing, is when you try to do something in the middle. Like, Lindsey Graham voted for Sotomayor and Kagan, and he said, look, I'm John McCain's best friend. I would never have picked them, but I believe when you look at the Constitution that, are they qualified? And they're qualified, so I'll vote for them. So he gets beaten up on right-wing shows. Or there was some issue where I thought that we should have a more private approach if we're going to do the public option, that we should do, it's a long story, but have a more competitive public option, because I was very concerned that states like ours that are more cost-effective health care, then it screws us versus some other states. I just got beaten up about that on some of our shows. So that just happens all the time, and I think that can be the scariest part, and it gets to the outside money as well, the super PAC money that draws people away and makes it harder to get things done. So and the culmination here, summary of your question, yes, it's a problem, but I hope you see here, especially in the Senate, we do like each other. We do, right, Deb? Yeah. Okay, so we do, and we tend to have more civility in the Senate. And I've done panels with everyone, from things with Mike Lee. I mean, we really do tend to get along and like each other and look for that common ground.
Franken and I had an amendment together. Can you believe that?
There you go. Okay. Good.
Al Franken, Deb Fischer.
There you go. And so anyway, but the point is we do that, and we do are together more than people think, really, because we have long days and we're together. I don't really see that as a classic explanation for the problem, that you're not together as much. That is just not it. To me, the explanation is, and it's not the people getting mad, they're just expressing it. They once had a cane on the Senate floor, and a guy caned the other guy like 100 years ago, so there's always been a little friction, But for me, this outside money that's pulling people and polarizing things is a major, major problem.
So I brought up that caning incident in the same context once, and I believe it was in the 1850s, and got a very good rejoinder, which was, okay, fine. If what you're saying is that civility is better now than it was in the run-up to the Civil War, yes, it is.
I think you
slightly
see
better.
from our tone, we're big believers in civility.
Yeah.
Deb and I are, and I hate when people start calling people names.
As a reporter, I stopped reading the comments years ago.
No, I use the caning too when people say, oh, there's so much gridlock. 'Cause that's what you hear. You hear it from people campaigning, you hear it from whatever. But it's always that there's gridlock, nothing's happening, nobody gets along, you don't talk. And I go, well, at least we're not caning each other on the floor of the Senate.
That seems like
Yes.
the ultimate low bar.
Yeah.
All right, let's bring the microphone all the way up to the front. Go here in the front row.
If you'll stand and introduce yourself, I'll hold the microphone.
I'm sorry?
If you'll stand
Stand.
and introduce yourself, I'll hold the microphone.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Peggy Orchowski. I'm the congressional correspondent for the Hispanic Outlook. And I've been covering Congress about 10 years, and I totally agree. I see a lot of comedy. Yesterday, at the hearing yesterday on the H-2B visas, I saw a lot of comedy. You went up to Senator Tillis afterwards, and
Well, Senator Tillis and I agreed, and we
Yeah.
we didn't exactly have comedy with Senator Sessions.
No,
I'm thinking-
I
yeah,
didn't
okay,
include
okay.
Sessions, but nevertheless, you see it. You see it. Even the archaic little traditions in the House, where it's the gentlewoman this, and you don't see a lot of screaming. So, where the problem sometimes I think is, there was 2 reporters there yesterday. It's this kinds of things are not being covered in the press. And I was wondering how you feel. I don't know what kind of local coverage you get, what kind of local paper coverage. I know a lot of local papers no longer cover their congressional delegations. And so they're not getting to see some of this, and it's not getting in the press, just the bad stuff does. So I'm wondering if you could comment about that.
I'll just be brief because I know we want to get some more questions in. Actually, I think that's a good point. And it's very easy to go to the negative, and they pit you against each other on these shows. And we've tried, Barrasso and I once went on one of the Sunday shows they said they wanted to hear what we could get done this was in our, maybe you've heard the story, and we came up with stuff. We both agreed on that we wanted to get the medical device tax suspended or repealed. We both agreed that we wanted to get a transportation bill done. Everything we were going to say actually did get done. This was at the beginning 2 years ago. And then the questions were all much more polarizing, and we handled them, and it was fine. But I do think that people go for that, and that is really, really unfortunate. And I also think that there's just a sense that that's what sells. And there are good things that are happening. That being said, again, I point out on these major issues, we really have to get things done. And on the issue of civility in politics, I think that there's a major problem right now, and I'm not going to get into the whole Trump thing anymore, but I think that it has really made things worse and coarsened it.
Senator Fischer, do you think it would be a good idea to have a federal subsidy for local newspapers?
No.
That's a joke. I'm just saying that as a
I know,
former
I'm looking
local
at you going,
newspaper,
"What?"
I'm a former local newspaper reporter, and the industry is
Yeah.
on very
It's
hard
struggling.
times.
It's
But
struggling.
but certainly the economics are a part of that, aren't they?
Right. Right. We're fortunate from Nebraska. We have the Omaha World Herald, has a reporter stationed in Washington. I have a great press department. We put out a lot of press releases where smaller papers do pick those up and they print them. I think that's good. Again, it's all back to how I want to message what we're doing, how I want to show that we're doing things. And there are ways to do it. Social media is great. You know, I have my own Instagram account. They tried to get me on Snapchat. That hasn't worked, has it, guys? But I have a personal Facebook account, you know, and I think that does connect with people. And I think social media is a big part of where we are now and where we're going.
And I should have mentioned our local paper, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, actually has 2 reporters here. And I do think that your point, that has helped. And also the Fargo Forum owns a bunch of papers in our state. So they're covering North Dakota and Minnesota. So here's what's interesting. So we do tons of stuff. Senator Hoeven and I, Republican senator from North Dakota, together, those papers will cover it more. Senator Heitkamp and I do that. And then Congressman Emmer and I, he took Michelle Bachmann's seat, right? So we are leading the bills in the House and Senate to lift the embargo on Cuba. And there's a lot of coverage about that. So I think in the local media market, which will get more granular, there's an incentive to work across the aisle more, and because they think that's good. They'll cover it. It's interesting to them. And you're exactly right. That was the second part I was going to. If you don't have that, there's less incentive to, because if they're gonna cover it at home, they're not gonna just look for every single divide. Yeah.
Let's get a question from the back, all the way in back, right? Yep, right there.
JJ Zhang with Fair Vote, and I'm actually also from Minnesota, so thank you, Senator Klobuchar, for everything. My question is,
wearing purple for Prince? I think so.
How can currently elected women change or reform the electoral system from the inside in order to bring in more people of color and women?
Great question.
Well, I think a lot of this is recruitment and making sure that women and people of color are comfortable running. There have been all these studies show that especially women don't feel like they should run because they don't know enough. And the joke is that a man drives a Volvo, so he thinks he can talk about trade policy, and a woman thinks she has to get a PhD. And so it's really reaching out to women. And I have found, actually, I've told a lot of women candidates, spend a few weeks getting to know the issues so you're comfortable. Don't just start running and raise. I know everyone says raise money right away. Well, you got to get to a comfort level so you feel confident when you're going ahead. But it doesn't mean that you have to have an advanced degree. And so I think that holds people back. They don't like the negativity, and there's just got to be more recruitment. And we also have to make politics work for especially immigrants. People who look different than the people that are in the Congress, and I think that will also give them a lot of faith in running.
Senator Fischer, do you personally make efforts to recruit more women to run for office, to participate?
I have a program that I do annually in Nebraska. It's called Bridging the Gap. And I started this to reach out to all women, but really to target younger women. Because I want younger women to be involved, I want them to be interested, I want them to be able to develop networks, I want to see some mentoring happening. And so we have, last year we had a panel of very accomplished women who were able to share their experiences. We give scholarships so that we can have young high school women come to it. It's not a partisan deal at all, but it is to really build leadership, build networking, and build mentoring. So I will have it again this July. Looking forward to it. We had over 200 people at our first one, and we're going to continue with that. And it's really stirred a lot of enthusiasm and interest. I take my role as the first woman elected to a full term in the state of Nebraska very seriously. I know I am a role model. It took me a while to embrace that because, as you heard in my earlier comments, I don't like to focus on that, especially because I think we can accomplish a lot when we don't always look at gender. But I'm fully aware that we have to build new leaders, younger leaders, and we need to encourage women to step in and bridge that gap.
And what is the advice that you give women who are running or who are thinking about running for office for the first time?
Well, I would agree with Amy a lot on that. You have to, first of all, you have to know why you want to do this. You have to have, I think, a calling to put yourself forward and take that risk, to put yourself out there. But my advice to everyone, young or old, in whatever you do, is that you need to do what you love. Whether it is being a teacher or a physician or a pharmacist or a mom or a dad, you need to do what you love. And then you're going to be really good at it. And you're going to be really happy.
Great. Another question. Let's go. I don't think I've taken anyone on the right side. Let's go on the right side near the middle there. Right there. Yep.
I'm Karen Whitaker with the League of American Bicyclists, so thank you both for your work on the transportation bill. My question has to do with the discussion in the election about Washington insiders versus outsiders, in this question about whether or not Washington is working, how important would you say is experience versus bringing in new voices, and how can we have a mix of both?
That's a great question. What do you think about that, Senator Fischer?
I think you answered it. You have to have a mix of both. You know, really. As with any organization, it is stronger when it's diverse. That applies to politics as well. It applies to Congress as well. Diversity is a good thing. As I said, I'm a cattle rancher. I ranch in the sandhills of Nebraska. We are known for the grasslands that we have on those sand dunes. And there's a diversity of grass. We have cool season grasses and we have warm season grasses. And that's why we raise the best cattle in the world, by the way. But it's because of that diversity, it's a strength. If you don't get the early rains, and they come later, you may not have your cool season grasses, but the warm season grasses are going to be there for you. And that applies to politics as well. I want people who are business people. I want people who have been in different professions. I want people who have started their own businesses. I want people who have served on local school boards or in a legislature. I want men and women and every color that's there. That's what's important. Every age, every income. And that's what we've always had as a strength in this country, and we need to continue to promote it. I sometimes am concerned that we don't see people stepping forward to fill these positions, good people. And I think it's because of all the chatter that's out there that things don't work and that you can't get anything done. So again, if we can keep on message saying that things do work and we do get things done, good people are going to step up.
Senator Klobuchar?
Yeah, and I don't think I could have said it more romantically with the grasses and everything. It was really, really nice.
I'm homesick.
It was good. It was really good. But and I think one of the things that we have to have a mix, and why it's good to have some people with experience, especially when you look at the women. A lot of us have some power now because we've been there for a while. I think the last Congress, half the committees were chaired by women. Including things like appropriations, and a lot of the women on the Republican side have also gained a lot of power. And so if you were just say, oh, throw everyone out, it would actually, how are we going to gain, it's so hard to get women elected, as you know, that would be real trouble for us because we only have 20 out of 100, right? You are looking at 10% of the women of the Senate right up here, right now. And so I do caution people to say that you want new people, but you also want to have some of the experience. And people are, the things are turning over enough that I think you can bring new people in. And I do want to end with that, with what Deb talked about, that sense of accomplishment. For me, to get women to run or anyone to do something new, you do have to show them that it's worth it, that you can get things done. And to this day, my favorite moment in the Senate was when we had passed this bill with then Senator Stevens, helped, the Republican from Alaska, to make swimming pool drains safer. And it's a pretty small bill, but it was a bill that has saved multiple lives because this was a family in Minnesota that wouldn't give up, and they came to her. I'm a brand new senator, and they just believe, oh, she's going to be able to pass this bill. You know, I'm like, oh yeah. I found out it had been hanging around for years. Nothing had gotten done. And Jim Ramstad, our Republican congressman, told me it was a mess in the Senate. And every week that dad would call. His daughter had been maimed with a pool, lost her intestines, went on to die a year later. His name Abby Taylor. And he believed we could do it. And then finally, the Trent Lott helped, and we finally got it on this bill, and it passed. And just a few months ago in Commerce, we had the head of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and I asked the question, we're having deaths every year from this. How many people have died since the bill passed? How many kids have died in the pool from that? Zero kids. And so the story is much more, because it probably wouldn't happen without this family. It was about grassroots legislating can work. And maybe that's a small thing, but not when it saved the kids' lives. And I've just seen time and again, that was a story of Republicans helping me to get it done. So again, I just want to emphasize that there are really good things that go on across the aisle. And it's not just women senators all the time. And that's what we're trying to preserve. That's why we came on here this afternoon. And by the way, we are still here, Deb and me, right? Hanging out together. Some people may have gone home, but we're here because we were asked to do this. So I think part of why we did this is because we want to send that message out there.
Great. Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.